if you have an autoimmune condition, there's a good chance that you have that intestinal permeability piece. Most common symptoms are going to be IBS-like symptoms. And in many cases, treating the gut can help not just those digestive symptoms, but it can also help a lot of the co-occurring conditions from anxiety and depression to fibromyalgia to various types of autoimmune conditions.
Living with autoimmunity doesn't mean settling for less. Inspired Living with Autoimmunity is the show for high achievers who want the energy and vitality to live fully, not just manage symptoms. With your host and autoimmune coach, Julie Houghton. It's time to take your power back.
Izabella, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Julie. It's so wonderful to be here with you.
I am so excited for this conversation, and I had to stop and make myself hit record because I have a million questions and comments, and your new book is amazing. But if there is a listener out there who is not familiar with your work, which if they're not, they should be, can you share a little bit of your story? And it will naturally lead us to, I always think of you for thyroid health. And so why an IBS book, and share a little bit of your journey, actually starting with a pharmacist being a leader in functional medicine wellness.
Sure. So I was never really interested in IBS or the thyroid gland when I was doing my undergraduate studies. I wanted to figure out how to heal a disease. I wanted to actually figure out a new drug that could heal a disease. And I was kind of caught between, did I want to do pre-pharmacy or did I want to go to become a psychiatrist? And I thought pharmacy was the best choice for me because it was the cleanest. I didn't have to touch people or, hospitals and so on and so forth. I had a bit of a germophobia. And I ended up going to pharmacy school. And during that time, I actually got a diagnosis of IBS. I had situations where I was running to the bathroom, having to leave class early. I had to miss exams because of my digestive issues. I had diarrhea, really urgency where I had to run out and go to the bathroom. Sometimes I didn't make it to the bathroom, so I carried around extra pants and underwear. I carried Imodium, baby wipes, and all kinds of things with me just to kind of get through that. I went to my doctor and I was told I had IBS because of stress, and that because I was in graduate school that, required me to be in class 40 hours a week and take 2 exams, really early mornings twice a week, which was a lot. That, this was just kind of how things were going to be. I could probably heal myself if I dropped out of school and went and lived on a, exotic island and didn't work.
Couldn't we all? Yeah.
Yeah. But that wasn't really going to be my reality, right? And so I didn't really take it seriously. And then as time went on, I kept getting more and more symptoms. So what started with IBS, I ended up having anxiety and panic attacks at some point. Then I ended up starting to lose my hair. Then I had carpal tunnel syndrome. I had all kinds of allergies, acid reflux, a chronic cough. I was sleeping for 12 hours at night and feeling exhausted. I was constantly bloated. I had abdominal pain when I ate. And eventually, all of this led to a diagnosis of Hashimoto's thyroiditis. This was about 6 years after my initial diagnosis of IBS. In getting my Hashimoto's into remission. So I will say, once I got the Hashimoto's diagnosis, I felt like this is more serious and I really need to do something about this. I was already a practicing pharmacist.
You were used to having diarrhea.
Yeah, I was used to it. It was so common and almost normal, where once I got that Hashimoto's diagnosis, I had already been a pharmacist. I had realized that not all doctors were created equally, that the conventional medical approach wasn't necessarily working for everybody. And at that point, I wanted to know if there was anything I could do to get myself to feel better or get into remission with Hashimoto's. And so I was able to do so. And I ended up creating resources around that for others to do the same, including my website, Thyroid Pharmacist, and my books on Hashimoto's. But part of that process was actually getting my IBS under control and getting that into remission. So that was one of the first things I did on my healing journey. I didn't really know what I was doing, and it took me a while to figure out like how to actually heal the gut. And I've helped thousands of people do that now with thyroid issues, but also with other types of autoimmune issues, people with fibromyalgia and anxiety issues, and people with just straight up IBS or digestive issues. And so I decided to write my 5th book on IBS. This goes over all the different causes of it and how to treat it properly.
Which is, it is amazing, and I want listeners to know when they get the book, don't be intimidated. It's big, but it's not all clinical, although it has amazing clinical information for people who want to deep dive and follow the science. I have to commend you. I really, as I was reading the book, I was like, wow. You were just so open and honest about your experience. I mean, nobody wants to talk about IBS or poop, or although I talk about it all the time with my clients, but we don't. But I don't talk about mine. So it really is such a service to readers that first of all, this is such a common problem, and people don't talk about it. And so I just thank you for being so vulnerable to really share your genuine experience. And we'll talk a little bit later too about, I know your husband has an experience as well with IBD. And so I want to dive in. So for anybody who is not familiar with the Thyroid Pharmacist, get familiar. I remember running out and getting your books when my daughter was almost misdiagnosed with hyperthyroid. She has Hashimoto's, and they were just so quick to be alarmed and want to zap her thyroid. And the way you present information is so helpful for people because it's actionable, and it's not like you're keeping secrets behind your back. It's clear you want people to feel well and to be able to heal. And so thank you for that. This connection though between IBS and autoimmune is really tremendous. And there seems to be kind of this path of untreated IBS and then autoimmunity crisscrossing. Share a little bit of that wisdom with us as to why is that, and I was diagnosed with IBS, which I've never talked about on the podcast, right around 10 years before I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. And so reading the connection, I understand now the connection, but reading kind of that pathway in the book of how common that is. I think a lot of us, when we're diagnosed with IBS, is kind of well, you just have, I was told, you just have a sensitive gut, right? Same thing, stress, fine. But we're made to feel like this is just how we're built. And so, people need to know, don't ignore it.
Oh, for sure. I know a lot of times people will get one autoimmune condition and they'll be diagnosed with another autoimmune condition. I've seen a lot of ladies with thyroid issues and they don't necessarily do anything about this. And down the road, they'll have something like rheumatoid arthritis. And, there is a common connecting thread between the various autoimmune conditions. For an autoimmune condition to manifest, we need 3 things to be present in order for that to happen. And one of them is the genetic predisposition. The second one is some kind of a triggering event. And then the third one is intestinal permeability or leaky gut. We can't always do much about the triggers. Sometimes we can find, identify, and remove the triggers, but that's not the case in every situation. We can't change our genes in this day and age, but we can always work on the health of our gut. Yeah. We can always make our gut less permeable. When I first trained in functional medicine, I learned that about 10 years or so, maybe 5 to 15 years, depending on the person, there is some kind of a breakdown of the gut barrier that occurs before an autoimmune condition develops. And that breakdown could be something like the stomach flu, or it could be like food poisoning, or for some people, it could be IBS symptoms. So IBS, to get that label, to get that diagnosis, you need to have chronic ongoing digestive symptoms, abdominal pain, bloating, constipation, diarrhea. For some people, it's mostly constipation. For others, it's mostly diarrhea. For some, it's like they go back and forth between the two. But that is something that needs to be present for, at least 6 months and a few days out of the week for you to get that diagnosis. And some people might have those symptoms, but may not get the IBS diagnosis. But again, whether you have that IBS diagnosis, whether you have those IBS symptoms, or even a disruption in your gut barrier that you think maybe isn't so bad or has resolved, if you have an autoimmune condition, there's a good chance that you have that intestinal permeability piece. Most common symptoms are going to be IBS-like symptoms. And in many cases, treating the gut can help not just those digestive symptoms, but it can also help a lot of the co-occurring conditions, from anxiety and depression to fibromyalgia to various types of autoimmune conditions. And my hope with my book is that people will be able to heal their IBS, they'll be able to heal their autoimmune conditions, and in some cases, maybe even prevent the progression to autoimmunity from IBS.
Which it would be ideal, right? Like, let's just not go there. Or, as you mentioned, it is so often once somebody's diagnosed with one autoimmune condition, if they aren't addressing the root cause, including gut or causes, they will more often than not continue to. I was a collector not only of toxins but of diagnoses, and so if we don't make that change, that snowball just keeps getting bigger. And I do remember kind of rolling my eyes, I don't know, like 8 years ago, like, the gut again, it's the gut, everything's the gut. But I love that you highlight even, most of us know that stress impacts the gut, but we don't think of that other direction of, no, it could be the gut triggering anxiety. And so I love that you highlight that for listeners as well. So I know from reading the book that you are very deep believer in testing. And I think listeners have heard me in the past talk about my pet peeves with rheumatologists. That's a different conversation, but also GI doctors. When people get these diagnoses, whether it's IBS or even like ulcerative colitis, IBD, they're told, oh no, it doesn't matter what you eat. Like, that's not the problem, which is always such a challenge. But also the testing. I've had so many people say, well, I got a colonoscopy and an endoscopy and everything's fine. Right. So back to the, like, I don't know, maybe it's in your head, or I want to touch a little bit on the importance of functional medicine gut testing and why that's really important to do.
Yeah, there's like an interesting history of IBS where back in the day, it was considered like a psychological issue. There was a time period where doctors would go through and test for different things. It was considered a diagnosis of exclusion, but none of the tests that they were using at the time were conclusive. And so at a certain point, they said, well, if a person has these symptoms and they don't have these red flag symptoms like GI bleeding or weight loss or onset after age 50, then we're not really going to worry about testing because all the tests are inconclusive. And so IBS is considered a functional disorder where like the function of your gut isn't working properly. There's also inflammatory bowel disease, which is oftentimes misdiagnosed as IBS. And this is a structural disorder where you can actually see damage in your gut if you were to do a colonoscopy, right? And so that is true that IBS might not have any quote unquote visible changes if you were to do a colonoscopy. That said, if you have some of the symptoms we talked about, you do want to do a colonoscopy to figure out if you might have inflammatory bowel disease, because some people just never get the right test done or any test done at all. And they might have inflammatory bowel, which requires a different treatment approach. and is more serious and potentially life-threatening compared to IBS. Now, here's the thing. With the advance of functional medicine testing, we have so many great diagnostic tools these days that as of 2011, a doctor named Dr. Haba published a report of over 300 people with IBS diarrhea, and he found that 98% of them had identifiable and treatable causes.
Wow.
So that means like 98% of the time he could figure out what was driving their IBS and he could treat it accordingly. And it was a few different causes, maybe 5 or 6 that he identified. And then when you get the right treatment to the right cause, that person is no longer symptomatic. Whereas the conventional medical approach that doesn't do any testing, less than 25% of people actually feel better. And with IBS over the course of like 5 years, they'll still have IBS symptoms that are ongoing. And that makes sense because the symptoms are nonspecific. So a lot of things could cause you to have diarrhea. It could be a nutrient deficiency. It could be a parasitic infection. It could be small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. It could be a hormonal imbalance. It could be a toxin. It could be a medication. But if you don't test and if you don't do a comprehensive workup, then how are you ever going to know? And just telling somebody to take fiber and probiotics like is not going to move the needle.
Yeah, I love that you said that. And I will add the caveat, sometimes it's hard to catch things. Sometimes we have to test more than once. But the gut testing has gotten so much better. I know you reference a few in the book. Do you have a favorite?
It's like asking me what my favorite child is. Right?
Oh, no, we won't do that. Could have done that a year ago, but not now.
Right, yeah, a year ago. Simple answer. But there are a few tests on the market that I really love. I love the gut zoomer test and the GI map test. Those are the two that I've been using the most of. And for people, like you said, sometimes you might not get anything that comes out on a test. Even with the most perfect tests, they might miss things. One important trigger for autoimmunity, for thyroid issues, and IBS are protozoal infections. Yes. And I find them very commonly in individuals, but sometimes they might not be shed in every single bowel movement. So the gut zoomer and the GI map, usually they collect maybe 1 or 2 stool samples. And so you might actually get a negative test, even if you have something growing there. There's another lab company based out of Colorado. It's a retired physician that runs this small lab company called Parawellness Research, and they specifically look for parasites on your stool samples. And this is like I believe it's
a specialty.
Yeah, a specialty. And so you end up potentially needing to do more than one stool test. And if I were to recommend stool tests, I would recommend those 3.
Gotcha, which I think is great. And I love the idea of starting with something like the gut zoomer, because it's also like meeting people where they are and what are they willing to do. And sometimes those multiple collections really, I have people that they get the kits and they just don't do the test because they're just intimidated and overwhelmed. And so, doing something like a gut zoomer or GI map, starting with that broad, and then, like you said, if you don't get clear answers, it is definitely worth checking to see. Although I will say you did such an amazing job in the book of really empowering readers to try, safely try certain things. And so I love that. And I love that it's, not all pharmaceuticals, it's a mix. And sometimes pharmaceuticals are the gentlest, safest way to do something. So you did such a great job empowering people, of giving them a place to start.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like a lot of people in natural medicine maybe think that herbs are always the best route or the most helpful or efficient route, but sometimes it can be tricky because certain infections might go away within 3 days of a pharmaceutical, but there might not be a lot of herbal remedies that can get rid of them that quickly, or the herbal remedies might need to be taken for 60 days plus. And so I go through some of those details. kind of to that point, there are parasite protocols or cleanses out on the market. And some people do find them helpful, and I'm not necessarily against them. But unfortunately, I have seen people like utilizing all these things, and then we would do testing and they would still have ongoing infections because every bug has a drug. Like, this is something I learned in pharmacy school.
Every bug has a drug. Spoken like a pharmacist.
Exactly. And same is for herbal remedies. So I do a lot of research, and I have lovely research assistants that help me figure out which, there's actually studies done on herbal remedies and how they impact different infections. And so not every herbal remedy is going to work for every infection, just as not every drug will work for every infection.
Yeah. And you also highlight, and I want listeners to understand too, herbal doesn't mean that it's totally safe for everybody across the board. And I think that that's really important for, I get there's a time and a place, and there's certain herbal products that are great, and they do a really good job, like you said, targeted for the specific, and the cleanse for this and the cleanse for that, and everybody should be, some of them aren't right for everybody. And so I want listeners to be really careful and work with a provider, work with somebody who is following you and making sure that you're getting the right treatment protocols.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I want to shift gears a little bit, because I'm excited to hear your take on pulling from both worlds, from the IBS and the Hashimoto's world. Are there certain foods that you think across the board, if somebody's showing up, whether with autoimmune or with IBS, that you would start, like certain foods we should all be avoiding if we're in this kind of symptomatic pile?
Definitely like food additives and non-caloric sweeteners. So there are studies done on Splenda and sucralose that these can trigger Hashimoto's, and removing them from the diet can get Hashimoto's into remission. Erythritol is a sweetener, non-caloric sweetener that's added to like healthy keto snacks. And that can actually irritate the gut lining, so it can be a trigger for IBS and IBD. I would say if you can eat a home-cooked, clean diet with limited preservatives, that would be really helpful, especially if you tend towards IBS, IBD. Really big difference there. As far as like foods, I would say gluten and dairy are going to be some of the big triggering foods for for IBS and for Hashimoto's and autoimmunity. Up to 25% of people who carry the IBS label might actually have celiac disease. And so, that's like a big deal. If you have celiac disease, all the probiotics and all of the fiber and stress reduction is not going to help you if you keep eating gluten. Beyond celiac disease, there's also non-celiac gluten sensitivity. You could also be sensitive to the fructans in wheat if you have small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, which is present in 50% of people with hypothyroidism, maybe 70% of people with IBS. Then there is systemic nickel sensitivity, which is a potential trigger for IBS, and wheat is a high nickel food. So there's a lot of different reasons why a person might react to gluten, and not just celiac disease. There's like so many different pathways where I'm like, okay, you're probably going to be better off removing it as part of an elimination diet just to see if it helps your symptoms, because it just might.
Yeah, I love that you say that. And always the most, I think anyway, the most important part of an elimination diet is the reintroductions, because just because Izabella or Julie says, this may be a key player in what's going on. When people are always shocked when they do the reintroductions. It's like, did you make me sensitive? No, I didn't make you sensitive. I think of it as like kind of picking a scab, like we know that gluten can trigger leaky gut for non-celiacs, for anybody at any time in life. And so if we're going after healing the gut just on that alone, it's like, well, why would you continue gluten as you're trying to heal the gut? I think it's a losing battle. So I love that you said that. And the additives. I've had like 5 conversations this week about sweeteners, a variety of different sweeteners, like that surprised me, like coming up out of the blue, of people that were really thoughtful about most of the other things they're putting in their mouth. But then we've all demonized sugar successfully, that they're like, oh, I'll get the diet, whatever. Or so I love that. And you really do a nice job in the book too of explaining like the why. I think we all do a better job making good choices when we understand the impact.
Yeah, absolutely. And then just kind of like as a random thing, some people with IBS might actually react to like lettuce and raw fibrous vegetables. So that's something to consider. And then others might react to fatty foods and high fat foods. Doesn't mean that these foods are evil. It does mean that your digestion requires a little bit more attention.
Yeah.
You might need enzymes to support digesting these, or you might have some kind of infection that's blocking your ability to produce your own enzymes. So that is a clue. Again, trying to figure out which foods are triggering you. This can be a helpful clue on how to properly restore your gut, because my goal for people is not to just be on an ice cube only diet and not fasting all day to feel better. Like my goal is to figure out what's triggering your symptoms. And yes, it could be foods, but also beyond like serious food sensitivities or celiac disease, like some of these issues have driving factors behind them. Like if you have SIBO, you're going to be reacting to artichokes and onions. Doesn't mean these foods are evil. You need to be off of them for a long time. Yeah. Maybe you get off of them for a little bit and then you fix the SIBO, and then you can digest more foods and, live a vibrant life with the world as your oyster.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And SIBO too was a part of your journey that you share. And I think it's way more common than we used to think it was, 8-9 years ago. This overlap of SIBO with other challenges. Do you see a lot? You see a lot of that with your clients as well?
I do. I will say, what I have found to be tricky is that SIBO is oftentimes considered the root cause for IBS. Like there's a lot of information about that, and it absolutely can be, but SIBO doesn't necessarily happen in isolation. There are reasons why we develop SIBO. And if we just keep going after the SIBO over and over again, let's say we use antimicrobials for SIBO and we kill it off, in many cases, it grows back. And it's like, well, why is it growing back? And so the factors to consider would be hypothyroidism. An underactive thyroid is going to slow down our motility. Other reasons for slowed motility, such as low muscle tone in the gut, not enough carnitine, not enough choline, not enough thiamine. These can all slow down our gut motility. Gastroparesis. This could be neuropathy in the gut from something like diabetes. This could be an H. pylori infection that suppresses our stomach acid. So then these bacteria are more likely to get into the small intestine. And even some schools of thought believe that parasitic infections can cause a bit of a valve disruption, allowing some of the bacteria to get into small intestine. So a lot of times, all that said, is there are things people need to do when they have SIBO to make sure that it doesn't grow back. Like if you have an H. pylori infection, it's just going to keep growing back and back, right, unless you have that H. pylori infection.
Yeah, which makes sense if you think of it's literally bacteria in the wrong place. If we don't ask, like, how did that happen? Why? my favorite functional medicine. You know, as a mom of 3, I used to tease my kids, "Oh, that's your favorite letter." But really, functional medicine is all about, like, we have to keep asking why. So I would imagine with all of those potential drivers of SIBO or causes, that this super popular use of GLP-1 agonists, we're going to see SIBO numbers continue to go up then, if I should say improper use of GLP-1 agonists. So if people are slowing down their gut motility, then that could be potentially, lead to driving SIBO. Is that accurate?
I haven't seen any studies about SIBO and GLP-1s, but yeah, if they did, because they can slow down motility, that would make sense. That would happen.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what kinds of things, 5 years, 10 years down the road, the information that we're going to glean. So we touched on. I threw out there that we were going to also talk a little bit about your husband's experience with IBD, right? So you have IBS as when you're young, and you figure out how to heal yourself, and of course this was not a simple thing either. That was a process. Tell me what happened with Michael, and that it'll help us kind of highlight the differences in the two conditions as well.
Well, it happened when I was going into labor. Michael said, "Hey, hon, I think I might have some hemorrhoids or something because I saw blood when I went to the bathroom today." And I was like literally in labor going to the hospital. So I was like, "Oh, okay." Like,
I'm a little focused. Yeah.
And so, we have our beautiful son, and then kind of get back home. And then my husband's just like exhausted, and I'm exhausted because, I was in labor for an obscene amount of time, and I didn't sleep and all of that. And I'm kind of like, "Well, what's going on with you?" And then he's like, "Well, I still have this, blood in the toilet and all of that." So we got a hold of our physician, and he was a very good physician, said, "Okay, let's get you in for a colonoscopy right away." And we, when our son was 2 weeks old, we went in, and Michael got a colonoscopy that showed he had ulcerative colitis. He was prescribed a few different medications for that. And yeah, we were fortunate that we had 3 close friends who happened to specialize in gut issues. Steve Wright from the Healthy Gut Company is a close friend of ours. Dr. Jill Carnahan has gotten Crohn's disease into remission. She's a functional medicine doctor. And Debbie Steinbach is a functional nutritionist who had gotten her Crohn's into remission, and she specializes in digestive issues. And so I was like, okay, and I just went to IFM for the gut module, and I felt like we were, in good hands, and we were able to create a plan for Michael to get him into remission within a couple of months. It was under 8 weeks that he was in remission. We used the Debbie's squishy and mushy diet. Steve recommended high dose turmeric and high dose anti-inflammatories. We used Debbie's partial elemental diet approach. Dr. Jill gave us a few suggestions to help get that into remission, including low dose naltrexone. And IFM, I was looking at some of the herbs that can help get UC into remission. So we utilized boswellia, and another friend gave us serum-based immunoglobulin. So we were able to piece together a protocol that worked really, really well for him to get into remission. And he's been in remission for over 8 years.
Amazing.
Almost 8 years. Our son, almost 8 years, because our son turns 8 in 2 days.
Oh my gosh, another birthday.
Yeah. So it's been incredible to see that. We've shared that protocol with others, some of my clients, some friends, and it has worked really well to get people into remission rather quickly, even people that have been struggling for 10 plus years. We've also found that there are things that aggravate inflammatory bowel disease. So in my husband's case, erythritol was a big aggravating factor. For some people that are trying to heal themselves, high dose probiotics berberine, some of those more potent herbs can actually be aggravating, especially in the early stages. And so I wanted to detail all of that, and that is a whole chapter in the IBS book,
Yeah.
because up to 10% of people who get the IBS label might actually have IBD. And yeah, I mean, Michael and I have connected with people over the years who have struggled with IBD for 10, 20 years.
Sure.
And we've been able to share our protocol with them to get them into remission. So
Which
really
is
want
amazing.
so people don't have to have their colons removed or have any
Yeah,
risk of stomach cancer, right?
absolutely. So I have to ask, did he have symptoms he was ignoring before that or normalizing before that? Or was it really symptomatically like sudden onset for him?
He had been having symptoms for about for a few years at that point. There was a little bit of digestive symptoms and some bloating, a bit of pain in his body, and some irritability and sleep issues. So
Okay.
there was definitely like a personality change. Some of that
Interesting.
happens along with IBD. There was definitely some pain and an inflammation that he was experiencing, and some IBS like symptoms, right? But they
Yeah.
weren't like,
But not glaring. Like
yeah, yeah. So
he
it was
wasn't carrying around a change of clothes or
right. So he didn't have that. But I have talked to a lot of people who actually had that IBS label for many
sure.
years and just assumed that's all that was. Maybe they just assumed the bleeding was hemorrhoids, or they just had a lot of diarrhea versus
Yeah.
just bleeding versus diarrhea and bleeding. So it is something that unfortunately can happen where people don't get the right diagnosis, and then they might just be really struggling with symptoms and putting themselves at risk for more serious issues.
Yeah. Well, and I love that even though you are so rooted, pun intended, in the functional medicine world, that there are things that Western medicine does so well. And something like getting scoped is one of those things. And so I appreciate you sharing it's important, because sometimes people just get so like, I don't want to, my PCP wants me to get this, or my GI, and testing is important. And he wouldn't have gotten diagnosed if he didn't go for testing.
Yeah, absolutely. And just for people over 45, you do want to get a colonoscopy to reduce your risks of, colorectal cancer. This is a great screening tool. And I mean, you're not going to find that. You're not going to be able to get a scan and find that, or and definitely if you have positive blood in your stool, this is a really
Yeah.
important thing to follow up with. Some of the functional tests can actually find that. But yeah, but like sometimes they can miss that because you might not have blood in your stools in every bowel movement. I will say too, I feel like using the best of both worlds is really important. So doing a test like the GI map or the gut smear, it can actually show you some risk factors and markers that are associated with inflammatory bowel disease and even higher risks of colorectal cancer. So calprotectin, when that's elevated, that could be an indication of inflammatory bowel disease or overall inflammation in your gut. If you have giardia or blastocystis hominis, elevated beta-glucuronidase, these, or H. pylori, these have been associated with higher rates of colorectal cancer. And treating those, even if you're asymptomatic, can be helpful, I believe, in prevention.
Absolutely. Because again, it's what's going on downstream, I think, and the testing just keeps getting better and better, which is exciting. It really is. Even if we're not at perfect 100 across the board, so the combination of getting the stool test done and, if warranted, going to get a colonoscopy can literally be life-saving.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So amazing. Well, I love that he's been doing so well, and hopefully you had an uneventful ride to the hospital with this last baby, and no big, husband needs attention now.
Yes, I was able to focus on my own experience this time. No drama this time. So that was good.
Thank goodness.
Thank you.
So for those that again are not already in your world, and we're definitely going to send them to where they can get the book, but for people listening on the go, where's the best place to find more about you?
My website is thyroidpharmacist.com, and so I have a lot of different articles on all kinds of symptoms associated with autoimmunity. Primary focus is thyroid and Hashimoto's, but I also have content on IBS and other autoimmune triggers and the stress response. On social media, I have a podcast, Thyroid Pharmacist Healing Conversations podcast, and YouTube. You can definitely find me there. And my books are on Amazon and Barnes & Noble and wherever fine books are sold.
Yes. And one more time, we said it in the intro, but finding and treating the root cause of irritable bowel syndrome with the giant IBS on the cover. It is, like I said, it's such an amazing book. People can dive into the chapters that they feel drawn to, or they can geek out like I did and read it cover to cover. There were so many times I have like highlights all throughout the book and notes, because as I'm reading, I'm thinking of different people of like, ooh, we need to check this on this one. Or so it is such an amazing book. Listeners are leaning in because they know this is the time where I ask you for one step that they can take starting today to improve their health. And it can be anything.
I will say eat in a relaxed state, because if you are stressed out when you're eating, there's a good chance that you're not going to digest your food properly, and potentially whatever microbes are in that food, you're not going to neutralize them with your stomach acid, because stress reduces your stomach acid, and you can make yourself sick by eating when you're stressed out. So do try to take a few moments before you eat, take a few deep breaths, meditate, say a prayer, whatever puts you in a relaxed state. This is going to be really, really helpful for you.
Amazing. Such gold. Izabella, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us, and for laboring through this book and delivering it for us. It is just amazing. And I now have almost a whole shelf of just you. So thank you for just bringing your knowledge out to the world and always sharing it with a ray of sunshine.
Thank you so much, Julie. Such a pleasure to be here with you. And thank you for the work that you're doing to help so many people.
Thank you. For everyone listening, remember, you can get the show notes and transcripts and the links by visiting inspiredliving.show. I hope you had a great time and enjoyed this episode as much as I did. I'll see you next week.
Thanks for tuning in to Inspired Living with Autoimmunity, hosted by Julie Houghton, your autoimmune coach. If this episode resonated with you, share it with someone in your life who needs to hear it. For the complete show notes, links, transcripts, and everything discussed today, visit inspiredliving.show. You can also send in your questions there to be answered by Julie in a future episode. That's inspiredliving.show. Remember, it's time to take your power back.